So do we still have a spelling error in the minutes?
Yeah. Okay, we're ready to start. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the meeting of the Mashpee Sewer Commission being convened on December 5th on Thursday at 2 o'clock at Mashpee Town Hall in the Wacoit Meeting Room, and being broadcast live on local TV Channel 8 or High Def Channel number 1072. May I ask you all to silence your cell phones, please, if you have them on? And may I also ask you to stand for a pledge of allegiance as we come to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much. And could we observe just a moment of silence? Okay, and then our next order of business, or our first order of business, is to have a review of the meeting minutes from the meeting on November 21st.
Madam Chair, I have read the minutes. I would ask they be approved with the correct spelling of Catherine's last name.
And is there a
Second.
second? Okay, there is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I as well. Thank you very much. So the minutes have been approved with the correction to Catherine's spelling of her last name. And is there anyone here for public comment? No? Great. All right, so we're going to go right into our old business. It's considered old business on the agenda, but it's an opportunity to have a continued discussion on sewer rates and sewer rate revision. And I turn the floor over to Mr. Jared Meter.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So I put together a PowerPoint display to kind of maybe just educate a little bit more about the tiered billing system. The last sheet I gave you had a lot of information on there that was confusing for people. And what I did was I took that and boiled it down to what really matters, and that's what's it going to cost the individual customer and how do we get there. So make sure I got this right. Okay, cool. Anybody sent a slideshow with me before? I just happened to put on there. It's a statement of how I think I operate every day. Today's objectives, or my goal is to give some more detailed information about the proposed tiered billing system in preparation of the public hearing we're going to have on December 19th. What we're going to discuss is what is tiered billing, why tiered billing was chosen, key components of tiered billing, the enterprise fund, understanding the rate structure, and setting the rates. So what is tiered billing? A tiered billing system is a pricing model that charges customers based on the tier that they fall into within the pricing structure. Customers move between the tiers based on their water usage, and the more the customer uses, the greater the cost the customer will pay. Tiered billing is used by water and sewer utilities to incentivize water conservation. That's a little different from what most people are used to, where the goal of the company would be to reduce costs as you go up the tier in order to get you to purchase more product. In this case, we don't want you to use more product. We want you to use less of the product, which is the water. Allowing the consumers to see direct financial rewards for that conservation effort. The tiers consist of set charges tied to an upper lower limit of water consumption within the tier. Each tier has a specific price. It increases as you move up the tiers. Each tier has a minimum and maximum usage limit for the amount of water used. In the first tier, all customers will pay the full tier regardless of how much water is used. That's what we call the base charge. That becomes our nest egg for each year planning our annual budgets, so when we become self-sufficient. In all tiers, the customers will pay the full tier regardless of the amount of water used, which is what I just talked about. The charges are calculated at 1,000 gallon intervals for water used within each tier following that base tier. And I'll have some examples later on. Below is an example of the rate tiers. There are 3 key areas in understanding the use of the rate, for setting the rates and how customers will be billed. I'll stay with this. The areas in yellow is the number of tiers we have. So in this example, I only have 4 tiers. In my last town, we had 10, and it got to be very confusing when calculating bills. Smaller is better, but it might come a point when we have more customers and a broader range of usage that it gives you the flexibility. You could always add additional tiers in the future. The start and end is the range of usage within that tier, and meaning the water. So on the left, it just says the start and the end, and you'll see as we go out that it populates. The final row is the rate for that usage within the tier, and you'll see a little bit of difference, whereas in the first tier, you're going to see a larger sum of money. That's not per 1,000 gallons, that's total tier, what a customer would pay at a minimum, that base charge. And then when you go to tier 2, 3, and 4, it's actually per 1,000 gallons, and that's why it's less money. The Department of Wastewater Management is an enterprise fund. This means that unlike other town departments, we operate like a private business with a long-term goal of financial sustainability. There's 3 different ways we can budget each year. We have a break-even budget or level funding, which is most common in government. We can budget for a surplus budget, which is the estimated revenues will exceed the planned expenditures, or we can budget for a subsidy, which the planned expenditures will exceed the estimated revenues. And that's how we'll be operating in the beginning. The town has recognized that in the beginning, the Department of Wastewater Management will be operating with a subsidy in order to keep the rates affordable for the customers. The short-term goals will be to maximize those revenues in order to minimize the subsidy, and the long-term goal is to eventually get to self-sustainability. I've been informed that in the first year, maybe even 2 or 3, we would be 100% subsidized. And any money we bring in would then, the following year, could be used to either reduce rates, reduce the subsidy. It all depends. And then ultimately, but it will go into our retained earnings. We also will have equipment we're going to need to purchase, larger dollars equipment for, say, inspections and stuff that weren't considered part of the initial project. This is more of equipment. That could be ways that we purchase those items without asking the town to allow us to, borrow money in order to do it.
Garrett,
Yes, sir.
I can't tell you who gave me this information, all right? But back 10 years ago, when I went through everything you're going through now, what was established in some towns was a marginal rate, quote unquote, which was established when process was going online and you had no idea what your total cost would be. But you would set an arbitrary rate for the town. Then what you did was discount off that arbitrary rate, like 25% off what you'd charge those people before the full site cost is determined. You follow what I'm saying? Let's say the average cost in this town was going to be $15. Then what you would do is that the first 500 people you hook up, because all you're doing is flushing the systems and trying to make hay. What you do is reduce their rate from 15 by 25%, and it would stay that way until you are able to say the plant is now operating at efficiency. That would be after you get the second, third, and fourth phases in, and your volume is probably 80% of your potential. Then you switch over to your flat $15 rate. But by having a marginal rate, you get rid of all of the problems associated with establishing flexible things. So it's just a thought that you may want to consider and check with the other people as they came up. Chatham might be a good example. I got a lot of good information from Chatham. I'm not sure that's where I got this information.
Okay. Thank you. So one of the questions that was asked me at the last meeting is what is the average that people pay? So this next slide, and I did put it again so it's easier to find at the end, you have your handouts, you can just go to the last page and be able to reference it really quickly. But looking at what Cape Cod and then Eastern Massachusetts, you'll see that the average annual sewer cost on the Cape is $961.24, and in Eastern Massachusetts, it's $960.46 annually. So it's not far off whether you're on or off the Cape. On or off the island. Provincetown is the most expensive on the Cape at $1390.95, and then you had Plymouth at $1433.50. So again, they're very close and comparable. And same with the bottom number. So whether you're on or off the Cape, that price seems to be holding. There were a lot of different variables that I had that I removed from the slide because each system operates differently. Type of process it is, how much energy it uses, how much sludge you have to haul each year. And there's just so many variables. But the bottom line, what people care about in the streets is how much is it going to cost me? All right? And that's annual costs. So when we set the rates, you have several ways you can modify the rates each year, especially if we're going to do any adjustments each year, whether increase or decrease. And those ways are we can change the range of gallonages within a tier. We can increase the base charge for everybody or decrease, or we can change the rate per 1,000 gallons. All right, in this example, this is using the range of gallons with the base charge. And as you see here, every customer in this scenario would pay the $200 in the first tier. Everybody pays it. We can rely on that to be our guaranteed money for the year when we're trying to get as close as we can to our annual budget. Oops. Did I move? That's where it duplicated. Okay. All right, so you'll see an example here where in this scenario we had the $150 for the base tier, which resulted in $483,975, and this is using the fiscal year 22 water use records. If we up that to $200 at that base charge, our revenues would be $527,375. That's just an example, and that would be our nest egg. And then you would try to make up the difference in the other tiers. Changing that base rate. So using the example after it's changed of 200, that would go from at 150, 4 quarters, $600 a year to $200, 4 quarters, $800 a year. All right, that would be the minimum what everybody pays. So when you guys start thinking the rates during the rate hearing, that base charge, that's what everybody's going to pay. So when you're thinking about low-income people, you got to remember they're the ones that are most likely they're going to have to pay that charge. And that's where the bulk of our revenue will come from. Changing the rates for the gallons per tier. So in that original handout I gave you guys, there was a lot of different numbers on there. What I did was I pulled out the one line that I felt was most important that will help understand more, I think, of by changing the individual tier usage range, how that affects. So in this first scenario, you see always, number one, 100% of the people pay that. But depending on their gallons usage on that year, 59% of the people would move into the second tier. Then an additional 10% of those people of that 59 would go into the third, and then topping it off with 1.8 of the people would actually make it to the top tier. By increasing that rate, what we did was we still obviously have 100% of the people pay tier 1, but we reduced the number of people that were in tier 2 from paying into that, for being the second tier or that higher area billing. But what that ended up doing is that cost us money. We lost money because of it. So for every action, there is a reaction. And that table I showed you in the beginning calculates all that in there, but you'll be able to use it when we're setting the rates. We can be able to put in there, and based off of past history, you can see, okay, we did this, but it affected this, and we can work ourselves into a number that gets us to our goals as best as possible. But that's how the relationships work. All right, we also have the option of just changing that price per 1,000 gallons. All right, so just by In the first scenario, we have it set at 15, 20, and 30. We went from 20, 25 to 30, and just by making that $5 change per 1,000 gallons in each one of the categories, we were able to raise it from $483,975 to $562,580, just by adding the $5 in each one of those tiers. That's just a reiteration of what I was talking about. All right. And then this breaks down the math for how you would calculate it out. So a customer usage is 15,000 gallons. They pay the base charge of $200 in that first scenario. They made it into second tier because they were 15,000 gallons. So 5,000 gallons would be paid at $15 per 1,000 gallons. Does that make sense? I was trying to. So, and it shows that reaction if we were to increase those rates, how that affects everybody. And then again, this is that slide that just shows you the highs, the lows, and the average. We understand, yes?
The people in this town are used to the similar billing from the water department.
Yes.
What are their brackets?
What are the water department's brackets? I haven't even looked.
You should consider using those brackets in this scenario.
So we get that a lot in wastewater. Oh, you should use what water department uses. Well, you got to remember the water department has pretty much 90% of the town watered, and therefore their rates are set off 90% of the people paying into it. We're a much smaller system, so the comparison is.
That's not what I'm saying. They're used to the bracket system. See if you can use the same brackets. That's all.
Oh, like the number of tiers and the number.
Yes.
We can absolutely do that. If they have a 5 or a 4, we can look at it,
Yes, I know.
which
I'm
ones they
saying,
use.
see if that makes sense for you.
Yep, we can absolutely look into it. And then, I just want to remind everybody, the area that we're trying to encompass and bring into this is this small area for right now. We will eventually get bigger with phase 2 coming on board, but that's our customer base right there. And then I love this slide, I'm sorry, it's just a personal. Yeah. But does anybody have any questions? I got that from it's in England. They actually had that.
It's just a reminder of how costly it is to maintain the systems.
Yes, anything can end up down there. Any questions? Like I said, this is more of a, you have to understand that there's a lot of flexibility when doing this. So when we set the rates that night, we're going to come in with a base number and a starting point and what this is. And then you should have in your head at that point kind of what you think is too much for the average person. But we got to also remember that our goal is to try to fund the project eventually. We
Yeah.
cannot do it now.
Can you find out what the rates are in these other communities as well?
Like how their tier systems are broken down and how they,
Just the rates, that's all I said.
okay, what they're charged. Well, okay, so you
Do
want,
they- How many are tiered, for example? How many of them are tiered?
They're all tiered.
pretty much all of them.
Okay,
Yeah, there was a couple holdouts at the end. I know in the vineyard we were holding out.
okay,
And we've, in one of the towns, and we ultimately went to the tiered system.
okay, no.
It's what's being promoted by the
State. Yeah.
DOR and everybody.
I have a question. So if 90% of the town is on town water, I assume that the other 10% of the town is on wells. And
Yes.
so what is the proposed way to,
Hold on, that's another question. If you want to create that inquiry, we'll have it as an article. Jared needs direction today on this subject.
all right,
You have any questions on this subject that he's worked on?
Well, won't that have an impact?
I
at some
think I
point?
can answer
So
that. I think it's within the realm because it's going to be how people get calculated in this subject. So people that are on well water, if they're individual homes, we would have them add a meter into their well system. It would be inspected by us because obviously we want to make sure that nothing that is billable is excluded from the meter. But like if you have irrigation or a farm or something like that, those pipes would be attached prior to the meter, so that way the only thing gets metered what goes into your house, and in theory would go down in your toilet.
Jared, that's a perfect example why I didn't want the subject to get discussed
It's
today, because he can't answer that question today. The town would have to have a ruling that says we are gonna charge everybody the average price or some other ruling. You can't dig it out of the ground because you're not going in my cellar to put a meter in.
No, I'm
That's the
not doing
first
it.
problem, okay? So just keep that subject off the table and get this one done so we can move ahead and do our jobs. Now we'll discuss the town from a political point of view. How do you take and include the cost of running the town of those people that don't have a sewer? That may use the sewer, but you have a water well of their own. That's a complicated issue, and I don't think it belongs
Joe,
on
I'm going to disagree with you on this, and the only reason I'm going to disagree is because you have to be on sewer if you're in the sewer area. I'm not going to go into your basement. I'm not a water guy. I'm not a meter guy. What I'm going to tell you is when you fill out your application, you're going to have a meter put in. You're going to hire somebody. You're going to get the meter. We're going to tell you what type you can have, and you're going to have the person go in there. I'm only going to go and inspect it like any inspector to make sure that it's
That's right.
okay.
The town has to make all those rules. That's what I just got through saying.
Policy.
And they ain't gonna make the rules. That's the problem, okay? You and I could get it running in 6 months, no problem. But it isn't gonna happen because it's a political issue. It took 30 years to get where we are with the sewer, and it could have been done in a month with a couple of engineers.
Are there any other questions about what Jared has presented?
I think it's fun.
So so when we have the meeting, the public hearing on the 19th, it'll be here in this room at 2 o'clock on the 19th, and you'll be doing a presentation to people who are coming?
So what
Or
we'll do is
no?
we'll have that what I showed you guys in the last meeting, that handout, it'll be on the computer. So as we're discussing, you guys can throw numbers at me. Hey, what would happen if we charged this amount per gallon? Matt would be able to put it right into that program, and you will see what average cost will be and how it breaks out for each person. So you'll have the opportunity to adjust until you can get to that number you feel is safe. And if people from the public show up and they say, hey, listen, I can't afford anything more than this, well, we can work with that, and we can actually play with the different scenarios. Obviously, we can't please everybody, but we're going to give you the flexibility to be able to try to, by the end of the meeting, dial into a number that everybody feels most comfortable with that can be beneficial mostly for the town.
Meredith, I have a question.
Good, Catherine.
Is this going to be posted to the website before or
Yes,
not?
I plan on, that's why I
Okay.
kind of did it the way I
So
did.
what kind of questions are you anticipating? I mean, like to go into a public meeting like that, you may be anticipating.
So
some
previous
sort of
rate-setting
questions.
hearings I've had, whether it be changing rates and stuff, it usually just gets into, I can't afford anything more, or I don't want to pay this bill. And it's unfortunate, but we do have to operate the system.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I'm glad I'm not a political official, because that is the hard part, I think, for your job, is trying to
Defend.
do what's right to keep the operation going, but also it's going to cost people money, and nobody likes being charged more money.
But will you be throwing out a figure then of
We
what
will have
you
a starting number.
suggest?
Based off of using that average that we showed for all the different towns, we're going to try to stay within the average, and then it's up to you guys as commissioners. We can work it lower, work it higher, but at least we'll have a starting point, and you can see how we figured it out. We might even stay at that number, but we might change it within the tiers. Who's going to be more responsible for carrying the load as opposed to who's not? And that's where it gives you, I know in other years I've just changed one tier in order to make up that little bit of a deficit. But the next year, we raised one, but we lowered one. You know, so there is ways, and there'll be many scenarios that come into place, like once we start getting maybe a hotel involved, or we start getting restaurants. That changes the whole factor. So,
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important to mention that, that these rates may be adjusted on a yearly basis as we connect more properties and more types of properties, and more people get involved and benefit. And I'd also point out that when you're talking about, yes, they're going to pay, but we're all paying right now because of the septic problem. So we're trying to mitigate that.
yes.
Okay.
I do have another question. I'm looking on the page where you have the average sewer bills of the various towns on Cape and off Cape, and there's a wide discrepancy. Is there anything that you could look at and say, it's small towns pay less, or large cities, or the prevalence of commercial property, and therefore there's higher bills or lower bills? Is there anything that you can kind of look at? Because we're looking at Provincetown at about $1,400, and you're looking at Harwich at $626. That's a big difference.
Trying to call, I have everybody's number on a separate spreadsheet and who they're, and trying to get people to actually call you back and answer these questions was almost impossible. And thank God for the Mass Water Resource, or the MWRA, right, that Mass Water Resource Authority? Yeah, they produce this every year. They go out and do their own fact findings. That's how it came to these numbers. But there are a lot of, some towns are subsidized, some aren't. Some have high commercial, some don't. Every town is just its own beast.
And rural areas aren't necessarily connected to the sewer, so.
And that's why I say it's just, we got to look at more or less what is it going to cost our customers. And these are just what average sewer bills are in the area, regardless of what they're doing. They also have to point out is that also during that meeting, we're going to discuss fixed rate billing. We do have situations where you have a condo that has multiple dwellings on one meter. How do you factor that in there? I have a suggestion. I'll bring it forward that night. But that is another scenario. Another scenario is we're going to have town, like the town hall is going to be on it in phase 2. Traditionally, what I've done is we put them on a per gallon usage and not in the tiered system. What they use is what they pay for, and it's a lower rate because it's our town. We don't want to, inadvertently we'll raise people's taxes if we kept everybody the same thing. So the goal is to keep it down. And another options as we get bigger, one town we had senior citizen, if everybody in the household was over the age of 65 and on a fixed income, they had a lower rate, same as the town. And it was per what they actually use and not based off of the tier minimum. And there was the 100% disabled veterans. We had another one for those people because, again, they were most likely on a fixed income. So those are the scenarios we have to look into, but the key ones we'll look at is when we have a condo and what that town rate would be.
I have a question for you. How different would the rates be for people who are seasonal? I mean, is that going to be are the tiers going to be then by quarter or by season? And will that make an impact with people being seasonal?
So being from the vineyard where we were heavily seasonal, what we did is we set that base charge. They paid regardless if they used it or not. It's a use it or lose it scenario. In the first tier, you pay it because at the end of the day, we still have to maintain the pipes in front of the house. I still have to maintain the system.
Good answer.
Yeah.
So essentially, you're going to be looking for us at the next meeting to come up with a base rate.
That is the ultimate goal. That is the minimum that we would have to come up with.
After the next meeting.
Well, it would be at the public hearing.
You don't negotiate at a public meeting over a public rate. You create a rate, then you take it to the public, or take it to the selectmen.
You could. Don't have to, but you could. Never done it that
No,
way,
you
but
can't.
if that's how you choose to do it, that's up to you
It's not gonna
guys.
work. You can't go into a meeting and negotiate a rate in a public meeting. It
Yeah.
doesn't work,
I don't think so.
okay? But what you can do is lay it all out like you've done here, especially with the comparisons to the average, all of the towns and communities. And I think if you added the base rate, because it helps you avoid the definitive thing of what if I have 2 seniors and 6 kids and all of the variables. You can't get into that. You get stuck in it. You can do it privately with the management and with the historical information and work it out. But you gotta stay away from the itty-bitty details, which we all want answers to, but not in a public meeting, because then you've destroyed the meeting. The meeting won't, its effect is to advise people that we know what we're doing and we're gonna set a fair rate. That's the goal of the meeting, not the
And to
details.
give people an opportunity to express their opinion about
Yes.
what that fair rate is.
Yes.
I mean, don't you think there could be a discussion about a proposed base rate at that meeting? So,
You go ahead and you run the meeting,
I
because
mean,
I'm
I'm
not
not-
going to it. if
I'm,
you're
j-
gonna
I'm
do that.
asking, just asking.
No, I mean, so every meeting I've ever gone to, they don't normally give the final, this is what it's
Final.
going to be.
Okay,
but they do haggle the rates, and they move it around and
Rough.
get people's opinions and, see how the response is and what it looks like.
by
And then
test-
ultimately, after the meeting, they have an executive session, whether it be at another date or time.
Okay.
And make the final vote of this is how we're going to go.
Okay.
You have a great deadly answer to the rate question that's so confusing. Ask the person, and they may identify themselves as a non-resident, but they have a home here, so they're concerned. And you say, well, and you can say this to anybody, you've lived somewhere else, what was the rate? They may not know. That's okay, that just quieted them, all right? Or if you come up with a number, someone else says, okay, how about $15 or whatever, it gets on the table. And you ask another person, how much do they pay? And they say, well, I pay more, or I pay less. It helps you then control the meeting, okay? But you're going to do that up front. That's the ethics of giving them a nice list of realities and let them participate. But we just have to be careful. Don't get caught in the bog down. I spent my life chasing down ghosts, okay? We're gonna charge people a fair price on this. That's what we're gonna do. And that's what you gotta address, not the actual number.
One of the things that, if you remember where we started with all of this, is that initially the rates were going to be determined by bedroom, as the assessor had been looking at how we might be charging. And it was a concerned citizen who had said, well, but couldn't we look at it by usage? And I think it's important that you remind people that you did go back and look at and changed how we were originally considering or looking at the sewer rate, and that this was in response to being fair by looking at usage, and that's the main thing that is going on, and that's the main reason why we're having the meeting, to be able to come to conclusion. So I think people need to understand that there has been a change, and that, and it's a good direction to be going in, and it was responsive to someone who had asked the question, which was a legitimate question,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
And you've done a great job in being able to pull all this together and to give us some comparisons and give us some ideas of where to go with it.
Yep. And that fixed method of billing, like we said, was the bedroom count way, the lazy way I said it, which causes the uproar, but that still might be a portion of our billing cycle. And that's one of the things we're going to bring forward at the meeting, is we're going to end up with like those, condo areas where you have 10 homes on one meter. How do you determine who's using what? The house is already built. You can't fit a meter in there. How do we do that? Well, one of the options might be is that in those areas, they become a fixed billing based off of whatever the average we come up with for the users. That is an option.
Average for the users within that cluster of residences?
Just within the town of Mashpee, what an average home would use, a 3-bedroom home or a 2-bedroom, because I think all the condos we have are 2 bedrooms, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I have to double check on that. But they're not big, but what we do is we look and say, what does the average 2-bedroom home use? This is what they pay. This is what it is. We'd still read their meter, that 1 meter, but just, it's how do you divide it?
Go ahead, but keep in mind the one fundamental you haven't even brought up today, which is the driver of everything here. It's the average amount of water one person uses, okay? And I think, what was it, $50, 50 gallons per day per person is what this town uses in their 900 or 92% that's hooked up. 50 gallons per day per person, that's what they use, okay? So it doesn't matter how many bedrooms you have. It's the amount of people. Now, the condos are gonna use less, so it would be fair, and that's gonna come out in the end, that we've gotta do is maybe have a different rate for the ones that are bundled together in buildings, that's all.
And that's the point I'm trying to make, is because I can't go after the person thing,
That's not-
because I have my
that's
kid
not
moving
part
this
of your-
month, my kid moves out next month. How do I track that? I'm not their warden.
Yeah, but you can't get caught into that now, because there aren't any details.
Right.
I think one of the most important things is for us as a group to be transparent and make sure that everybody gets to ask whatever questions they want and feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, but that's why we'll have that in front of you, so that when people ask questions, you might say, hey, can we see what that looks like? Well, here's what it looks like. We're not saying that's what it is, but you can kind of see the overall end game of what, because it might be one person, but that one person could be the same another 100 people, and what does that overall impact the system?
Are there any other questions or comments? No? Well done, Mr. Meter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And like I said, we'll have Karen put this up on the webpage, these slides, so the public has more preparation if they decide to look at it before the meeting, for the hearing.
Great.
Get on.
Okay.
I'm going to have to go and, for another appointment, so thank you very much.
And thank you for being here, Phyllis. We knew your time was tight.
That's the end of the meeting, isn't it?
I just have just one reminder. We're just about at the end of the meeting. This was our main reason for coming together today. Unless, Jared, did you have a wastewater superintendent report that you wanted to do at all?
I'm just gonna keep it very vague. So last meeting, you discussed about having a freshwater committee. Ashley has actually already given me a great proposal that's being reviewed,
Awesome.
and then it'll go upstairs, but she attacked it, and I already have it, and so I'm just reviewing it, and then have some more people look at it, and we'll be, in the near future, presenting it
Great.
to the committee.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That's great to hear. Because the only other two things I have is that I did do a draft of an annual report for the Sewer Commission, and I did give you a copy here, and I also sent you a copy, all of you, sent you all a copy of it for electronically so that you can see if there are any glaring errors or if there's anything that you feel that needs to be added to it. And just two other, well, that the letter is going to be going out to Sea Oaks to make the recommendation from our decision last meeting. And also, was the fence put in at Summerwood?
So the fence was put in, there was some damaged posts, so they're just waiting on the new posts come in to finish the remaining length. It was a little short, there was a customer from, is it Summerwood, actually,
Summerwood.
right? Summerwood that contacted me, so I talked to them, or left them a message in their voicemail that it is being completed, it's just we had to send some of the pieces back in order to get the undamaged ones.
Did they tell you thank you for doing it?
Yep, they did actually, they said it looks beautiful.
Wonderful. That's a great success. You
It
put
was.
a lot of work into that. And then the last thing is just to remind you that on Monday at the Select Board meeting, there will be a presentation of a long-awaited report on Mashpee-Wakeby. Mashpee-Wakeby Pond, it was one of the only pond in Mashpee that had never been studied. And so this 3-year study is now going to be presented at the Select Board meeting at 6:30 on Monday,
Great.
with, we're hoping, a management plan of what needs to be done, and that will have some impact on us as well. So other than that, if there are no other comments or questions or business to attend to, yes?
I'd like to make an addition to your draft on
Annual report?
the annual report.
Sure.
And our selectman in charge is here, is involved. Intermunicipal agreements with Sandwich, Falmouth, and Barnstable continue to show, I would say, are being confirmed. Is that fair
I'd
to
be glad to
say?
change the language. I can give you a copy of it as well.
She just said they continue to show progress. I think we want to say they are being confirmed, don't we?
Well, the agreements,
Intermunicipal agreements.
well, the agreements are confirmed. The towns have signed off on those agreements.
Okay, so
We're
just need to-
continuing our progress through the intermunicipal agreement.
Have
that we've
been
made.
confirmed in the sentence that she used the word.
Be glad to.
Okay.
Be glad to make the change. But feel free to send me any copies that you want, any changes that you want to send me electronically or on paper.
And you can
So,
share that
yes,
digitally.
Chris?
The presentation for Mashpee Wakeby is Monday, the 16th.
Yes.
Oh, okay, the 16th. Not next Monday, but the 16th.
Oh, thank you. How did I think that next Monday was the 16th? I guess I'm rushing the month. My apologies. So the presentation to the Select Board on the Mashpee-Wakeby study is going to be the 16th of December, which is December, 16th of December at 6:30 in the Town Hall. Okay, so are there any, may I entertain a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
And we're unanimous with going into adjournment. And thank you so much for all your hard work, Jared.